The baby's cries ceased abruptly on a cold February morning in 1876, leaving only the howling Wyoming wind to fill the silence of the small homestead where Josephine Shaw sat motionless, her tears falling onto the quilt she had sewn with such hope just months before. The doctor had left hours ago with nothing but sympathetic words that offered no comfort for the tiny life lost to fever, her third child to perish before taking more than a dozen breaths in this harsh frontier. Josephine's slender fingers clutched the edge of the wooden cradle, rocking it gently as if the motion might somehow bring back what was gone. Her golden hair hung loose around her shoulders, uncombed for days during her vigil. At 24, she had already endured more grief than most would know in a lifetime. The creak of the front door barely registered as she continued her silent mourning. "Joe." The deep voice belonged to Adam Owens, their neighbor from the ranch 3 miles west. He removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair as he stepped hesitantly into the bedroom. "Doc Jenkins told me what happened when I passed him on the trail." Josephine didn't look up, her blue eyes fixed on the empty cradle. Adam moved closer, his tall frame casting a shadow across the floor. At 30, he had the weathered face of a man who knew both hardship and kindness. He'd lost his own wife to childbirth 2 years prior, along with the baby, before moving west from Missouri. "I brought some stew," he said softly. "You need to eat something." When she finally raised her gaze, Adam felt his chest tighten at the hollow expression in her eyes. "What's the point?" She whispered. 3 babies in 3 years. Each one taken. This land takes everything, Adam. My husband, my children." Her voice broke. "I can't do this anymore." Thomas Shaw had died in a mining accident the previous spring, leaving Josephine alone and pregnant on their homestead claim. The neighbors, Adam included, had helped with the heavier work, ensuring she wouldn't lose the land she and Thomas had worked so hard to claim. Adam knelt beside her chair, his rough hands gentle as they covered hers, stilling the rocking motion. "Joe, look at me," he said. When she did, he spoke with quiet conviction. She wept beside an empty cradle. The cowboy said, "We'll fill this house with laughter somehow." The words came from somewhere deep inside him, a promise he hadn't planned to make. "This isn't the end of your story. I won't let it be." Josephine's eyes widened. "How can you promise such a thing?" "Because I've seen how strong you are," he replied. "And because no one should face this alone." The following days passed in a fog for Josephine. She moved through the motions of living, feeding the chickens, milking the cow, preparing simple meals, but the ache remained constant. Adam came daily, sometimes just to split wood or repair a loose board on the porch, other times bringing supplies from town. One evening in early March, as the first hints of spring softened the air, Adam arrived with a small wagon filled with seedlings. "What's all this?" Josephine asked, stepping out onto the porch. "Thought we might plant a garden," he said, unloading the wagon. "Better than the one you had last year. Vegetables, herbs, and these," he held up several rose bushes. "For beauty's sake." "I don't know if I have the heart for it," she admitted. Adam looked at her steadily. "Then borrow some of mine until yours heals." They worked side by side that afternoon, turning the soil and preparing the beds. Josephine found herself speaking of Thomas, of their dreams for the homestead, of the children they'd lost. Adam listened, offering neither judgment nor empty consolation, just the steady presence of someone who understood grief intimately. When Eliza died, he told her as they planted the roses along the front of the house, "I thought I'd follow her soon after, just didn't have the will to continue. But then I realized staying alive was the hardest, bravest thing I could do. And eventually, it got easier to breathe." Josephine studied his profile as he tamped the soil around a rosebush. "Is that why you came west?" He nodded. "Needed something new. Something that didn't remind me of everything I'd lost." He glanced up at her. Never expected to find something worth staying for. The words hung between them, neither acknowledging the implication. As spring unfurled across the Wyoming territory, Josephine found small moments of peace returning to her life. The garden flourished under their combined care. Adam taught her to shoot with better accuracy, insisting she needed to protect herself when he wasn't around. She showed him how to make sourdough bread, laughing for the first time in months when his first attempt came out dense as a brick. "You're terrible at this," she said, tapping the loaf against the table where it made a solid thunk. "Horses and cattle I understand," he replied with a self-deprecating smile. "Bread is a mystery. Try again," she encouraged, placing her hands over his to show him how to knead properly. The touch lingered longer than necessary, and when she stepped back, a flush colored her cheeks. In late April, Adam arrived with an unexpected gift: a half-grown border collie pup. "Found him abandoned at the trading post," he explained as the black and white dog explored the yard enthusiastically. "Thought he might keep you company when I'm not here." Josephine knelt to pet the energetic pup. "Does he have a name?" "Not yet. Thought you should do the honors." She watched the dog bound after a butterfly, full of life and joy. "Scout," she decided. "His name is Scout." Adam smiled. "Suits him." That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, Josephine found herself leaning slightly against Adam's shoulder. Neither spoke of it, but when his arm carefully moved around her, she didn't pull away. May brought wildflowers and increased activity in the nearby town of Laramie as cattle drives began and travelers moved west. Adam was busier with his ranch, but still made time to visit every few days. Sometimes he'd bring news or supplies. Other times he'd simply arrive for supper and conversation. One evening, he appeared at her door looking uncharacteristically nervous. "There's a social at the church on Saturday," he said, twisting his hat in his hands. "Thought you might like to go." Josephine hesitated. She hadn't been to town for anything but necessities since losing the baby. "I don't know, Adam. People will talk." "Let them," he said simply. "Been nearly 4 months since. Well, since February. No one would think it improper for you to attend a church social." She considered his words. "I don't have anything suitable to wear. You could wear a potato sack and still be the most beautiful woman there," he said, then immediately looked embarrassed by his boldness. Josephine felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. "All right," she agreed softly. "I'll go." Saturday arrived clear and mild. Josephine wore her best dress, a deep blue calico that Thomas had always said matched her eyes, and pinned her hair up for the first time in months. When Adam arrived to escort her, his expression of appreciation made her heart flutter in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible. The social was held in the churchyard, with tables of food and a small group of musicians playing lively tunes. Josephine felt conspicuous at first, aware of curious glances and whispered conversations. But Adam kept her close, introducing her to people she hadn't met and creating a buffer between her and any potential gossip. "Would you care to dance?" he asked when the musicians began a waltz. "It's been a long time," she admitted. "I'll lead," he promised, guiding her to the area where couples were gathering. Adam's hand at her waist was steady as they moved together, finding a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Josephine realized she was smiling, genuinely enjoying herself despite the lingering sadness that still visited in quiet moments. "Thank you for convincing me to come," she said. "Thank you for trusting me," he replied, his eyes warm as they held hers. The moment was interrupted by a commotion near the food tables. A group of cowboys, clearly having visited the saloon before the social, were becoming rowdy. One of them spotted Josephine and Adam dancing. "Well, look here," the man called out, his words slurring slightly. Shaw's widow didn't waste any time finding a replacement. Adam's body tensed, but Josephine tightened her grip on his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "It's not worth it." But the cowboy wasn't finished. "Heard you buried another little one not long ago," he continued, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet gathering. "Maybe Owens here can do better than your dead husband." Adam moved so quickly that Josephine barely registered what was happening until the cowboy was on the ground, blood streaming from his nose where Adam's fist had connected. "Apologize to the lady," Adam said, his voice dangerously quiet as he stood over the fallen man. The cowboy's friends moved forward, but the sheriff stepped between them. "That's enough, Benton," he said to the man on the ground. "You're drunk and out of line. I suggest you and your friends head home before I decide you need a night in jail to sober up." The group retreated, muttering threats but unwilling to challenge the sheriff. Adam turned back to Josephine, concern etched on his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have." "Take me home," she interrupted, fighting tears. "Please." The ride back to her homestead was silent. Josephine stared at the darkening landscape, emotions warring within her. When they arrived, Adam helped her down from the wagon but kept a respectful distance. "Joe, I apologize for ruining the evening," he said finally. "I couldn't stand hearing him talk about you and Thomas and the baby that way." "It wasn't your fault," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "But it reminded me that I'll always be marked by loss here. Everyone knows my story, my failures." Adam's expression grew serious. "Having the courage to love and losing what you love isn't failure, Josephine. It's the bravest thing a person can do." She looked up at him, really looked, and saw something in his eyes that both frightened and exhilarated her. "I should go," he said, stepping back toward his wagon. "Wait," Josephine said impulsively. Would you like some coffee before you head back?" Something shifted between them that night. They talked until dawn, sharing stories of their lives before Wyoming, dreams they'd abandoned and new ones taking shape. Josephine spoke of her childhood in Pennsylvania, how she'd met Thomas at a county fair, their journey west. Adam described growing up on a Missouri farm, his courtship of Eliza, their plans for a large family. "I never thought I'd feel hope again," Josephine confessed as pink light began to streak the eastern sky. "After Thomas died, I kept going for the baby's sake. And then when the baby..." She swallowed hard. "But lately, I've started to think about tomorrow again. Next week. Next year even." Adam reached across the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I'd like to be part of those tomorrows, Joe, if you'd allow it." She didn't pull away. "I'm scared, Adam. What if I'm not meant for happiness? What if we are?" He countered gently. "What if all this pain was leading us here, to each other?" As summer settled over the Wyoming territory, Josephine and Adam fell into a comfortable routine. He still maintained his own ranch but spent increasingly more time at her homestead. Together they tended the garden, repaired fences, and in the evenings, sat on the porch with Scout at their feet, watching the stars emerge. Josephine began to notice changes in herself. She laughed more easily. The paralyzing grief that had once consumed her days had receded to a quieter ache, one that honored what she'd lost without preventing her from moving forward. In July, tragedy struck again, but in an unexpected way. A lightning strike during a violent thunderstorm ignited a fire that destroyed Adam's small ranch house while he was helping a neighbor round up stray cattle. When Josephine heard the news, she rode immediately to his property, arriving to find him standing amidst the smoldering ruins. "Everything's gone," he said hollowly when he saw her. "All I have left are the clothes I'm wearing and whatever's in the barn." Josephine dismounted and went to him without hesitation, wrapping her arms around his waist. You have more than that, she said firmly. You have me. That night, Adam stayed in her spare room, the one that had once been intended for children. They both recognized the significance of the arrangement, but neither commented on it directly. This is temporary, Adam insisted as she showed him where she'd put fresh towels. Just until I can rebuild. Josephine nodded, but a part of her already knew the truth. She didn't want him to leave. Living under the same roof accelerated the evolution of their relationship. They developed domestic rhythms, discovering each other's habits and preferences. Adam learned that Josephine hummed when she cooked and that she couldn't start her day without a cup of strong coffee. She discovered his methodical nature, how he planned each task carefully before beginning, and his unexpected talent for storytelling in the evenings. One night in early August, they sat on a blanket beneath the stars after a simple supper, Scout dozing nearby. Adam had been unusually quiet all evening. I've been thinking, he finally said, his voice careful. Maybe I shouldn't rebuild my place. Josephine's heart quickened. Oh, Joe, I think you know how I feel about you, he continued, turning to face her. These past months, being here with you. It's become home in a way that plot of land never was. She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion rising in her throat. I know it might seem too soon, Adam said, taking her hands in his. And if you need more time, I understand. But I love you, Josephine Shaw. I want to build a life with you right here. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it. Adam brought her hands to his lips, kissing them reverently. I don't want to replace what you lost, he said earnestly. Thomas will always be part of your heart, and that's as it should be. I just want to walk forward with you, whatever comes. I want that too, she replied. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise exchanged under the vast Wyoming sky. When they broke apart, Josephine felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Will you marry me, Joe? Adam asked, his voice husky with emotion. Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, I will. They were married in September 1876, a small ceremony in the same churchyard where they had danced months earlier. Josephine wore a new dress of ivory linen, with wildflowers in her hair. Adam couldn't take his eyes off her as they spoke their vows, his voice steady and sure as he promised to cherish her all the days of his life. The town turned out for the occasion, even those who had whispered about the speed of their courtship. The sheriff gave a toast at the modest reception, speaking of new beginnings and the courage it takes to open one's heart after loss. That night, as Adam carried her across the threshold of what was now their home, Josephine felt both nervous and completely certain. Their coming together was tender and unhurried, each touch a discovery, each whispered word a treasure. In Adam's arms, she found healing she hadn't known was possible. I never thought I could be this happy again, she confessed later, curled against his chest. This is just the beginning, he promised, stroking her hair. Autumn painted the landscape in russet and gold. Adam and Josephine worked side by side to prepare for winter, harvesting the garden, preserving food, and ensuring the livestock had proper shelter. They expanded the chicken coop and added a second milk cow, planning for a future that suddenly seemed full of possibility. In November, Josephine missed her monthly cycle. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, but when December arrived with the same result, she could no longer deny the possibility. Adam, she said one evening as they sat by the fire, his arm around her shoulders and Scout sprawled at their feet. I think I might be expecting. His body went still beside her. Are you certain? She nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. Not entirely, but it's been 2 months now. Adam's face transformed with wonder, but she saw concern there too. "Joe, are you afraid?" "Terrified," she admitted, "but also hopeful." "Is that foolish of me?" "No," he said firmly, taking her face between his hands. "It's brave, and you won't be alone this time. Not for a single moment." As winter settled over the homestead, Josephine's condition became more apparent. Dr. Jenkins confirmed what they already knew and declared her to be in excellent health. Still, the memory of past losses haunted her, especially at night when doubts crept in like the cold wind finding cracks in the walls. Adam became her anchor. He took on more of the physical labor, insisted she rest frequently, and read to her from books he'd ordered specially from Denver. At night, he would place his hand on her growing belly, marveling at the occasional flutter of movement beneath his palm. "This one's strong," he'd say with conviction. "Just like his mother." Or her mother, Josephine would counter with a smile. They rarely spoke directly of their fears, but they were present nonetheless in the way Adam's eyes followed her movements, in how Josephine sometimes woke gasping from nightmares where she stood again beside an empty cradle. February arrived, marking a year since the loss that had brought them together. On the anniversary, Adam found Josephine in the spare room, standing beside the cradle that still remained there. "I've been thinking," she said without turning. "Perhaps we should put this away." Adam approached carefully. "Are you sure?" She nodded, running her fingers along the smooth wood. "Not because I want to forget, but because I'm ready for something new. This cradle holds too many sad memories." Together they moved it to the attic. The following week, Adam surprised her with a beautifully crafted new cradle, one he had been working on secretly in the barn during the winter evenings. "It's beautiful," Josephine whispered, tracing the intricate carvings of wildflowers along the side. "New beginnings," Adam said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her rounded belly. "New hope." Spring came early that year. The snow melted, revealing tender green shoots in the garden beds. Josephine's time grew closer, bringing both anticipation and anxiety. Adam rarely left her side, arranging for a neighbor boy to help with the ranch chores so he could remain close to home. In late April, just as the first roses were budding on the bushes they had planted together, Josephine went into labor. Unlike her previous experiences, this time she wasn't alone. Adam sent for Dr. Jenkins immediately, then stayed by her side, wiping her brow and offering quiet encouragement as the hours passed. "I'm scared," she admitted during a brief respite between contractions. "I know," he said, squeezing her hand. "But you're the strongest person I've ever known, Joe. And I'm right here." The labor progressed steadily. Dr. Jenkins arrived by mid-afternoon, nodding with approval at Josephine's condition. "Everything looks as it should," he assured them both. As sunset painted the sky outside their bedroom window, Josephine gave a final push, and their daughter entered the world with a robust cry that filled the room. Dr. Jenkins quickly examined the infant before placing her on Josephine's chest. "She's perfect," he declared. "Strong lungs, good color, all fingers and toes accounted for." Josephine stared down at the tiny red face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She's here," she whispered in disbelief. "She's really here." Adam sat beside them on the bed, his own eyes wet as he gently touched their daughter's dark hair. "Hello, little one," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been waiting for you." They named her Emma Rose Owens, Emma after Adam's mother, and Rose for the flowers that had marked the beginning of their journey together. She had Josephine's blue eyes and Adam's determined chin, a perfect blend of them both. The days that followed were filled with a cautious joy that gradually gave way to more confident happiness as Emma thrived. Josephine found herself holding her breath less often when checking on the sleeping baby, able to believe more fully in the permanence of this miracle. Summer bloomed around the homestead. Adam built a small cradle that could be moved to the porch, allowing Emma to nap in the fresh air while they worked nearby. Scout appointed himself the baby's guardian, often lying protectively beside her, his eyes alert for any potential danger. One evening in July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emma sleeping peacefully in Josephine's arms, Adam reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "A year and a half ago, I found you weeping beside an empty cradle," he said softly. "I told you we'd fill this house with laughter somehow. I had no right to make such a promise then, but I wanted so badly to ease your pain." Josephine leaned against his shoulder. "You gave me hope when I had none left," she replied. "And look what came of it." Adam kissed the top of her head, then gently touched their daughter's cheek. "I think this is just the beginning. This house was meant for a family, Joe. Maybe someday Emma will have brothers and sisters to play with." "I'd like that," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. The fear hadn't disappeared entirely, but it no longer controlled her. "Though perhaps we could wait a while before the next one." Adam chuckled. "No rush. We have all the time in the world." As if sensing she was being discussed, Emma stirred and opened her eyes, regarding her parents with a solemn expression before breaking into a toothless smile that lit up her entire face. "There it is," Adam said softly. "The laughter we promised." Josephine looked from her daughter to her husband, feeling a completeness she had once thought forever beyond her reach. "I love you," she said simply. "Both of you more than I can say." "And we love you," Adam replied, gathering his family close as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky. Always and forever. In the years that followed, the Owens homestead flourished. Emma grew into a spirited, kind-hearted girl with her father's love for horses and her mother's talent for storytelling. She was joined 2 years later by a brother, Benjamin, and eventually by twin sisters, Sarah and Lily. There were challenges, drought seasons, harsh winters, the ordinary difficulties of frontier life, but Josephine and Adam faced them together, their bond strengthening with each passing year. The garden expanded, the house grew with additional rooms, and always there was laughter, the most precious crop they had cultivated in this land that had once known only tears. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Josephine would think of the path that had led her here, of Thomas, of the babies she had lost, of the grief that had nearly consumed her. She kept their memories alive, sharing stories with her children about the brave father who had first brought her west, and the siblings who had come before them but stayed only briefly. And always beside her was Adam, steady as the mountains on the horizon, the man who had taught her that love wasn't a finite resource but an ever-expanding miracle capable of encompassing what was lost while still embracing all that was found.